like to introduce two of our panelists who are well known for their success in guiding startup companies to rapid solid growth. Marcus Sheridan and Todd Barr. Todd has been working mostly in B2B and Marcus in B2C space, but recently in B2B as well.
Lily, it's time to ask questions that have come in from our viewers. And so I'm going to cut this discussion down to have you share with us what are some of the questions that we have received from our viewers.
Yeah, so we've got one for Todd, one for Marcus, and several others for both Todd and Marcus. So let's start with the first one for Todd. What are top 3 online marketing tactics which works best for GitLab's distributed remote prospect base?
So I think we already answered that, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Inbound and search are the #1, so content marketing and also having free software on the internet helps. And the piece of that was interesting is the distributed remote prospects. So one thing that's unique about GitLab is we're a 1,300 person all remote company. We have 1,300 offices. And that was unique for us in this pandemic because we didn't have any disruption in work other than our kids were home and our, partners were home. And so, there was a lot of disruption in the world. And now what's interesting is that it's caused us to dramatically shift the tactics we're doing because we were doing a whole lot of events before going to these other third party. Remember I talked about going to other people's events and trying to kind of get our brand there. And that's now all virtual. So we are addressing the virtual kind of everybody being at home and distributed with virtual events and continuing our push in digital marketing now. So I'd say we'll leave it at that because I think there's some other interesting questions here to answer, but it was similar to what I answered before.
Okay.
Well, one for Marcus. What online marketing shift has been most established now and to become permanent in the post-COVID-19 era?
Somewhat to what Todd was saying just now, I think the biggest shift that we're seeing is just the awakening of what is possible with respect to virtual selling. I know personally, I have been training a lot of sales teams in the last 4 months on how to have extremely effective virtual sales calls, right? So many sales teams around the world have just been meeting with prospects face-to-face, nose-to-nose, as they say. And Bill's heard that phrase a billion times.
Yeah.
And the reality is this was the first time they couldn't do that, even if they wanted to do it. My swimming pool company now is doing 100% of our initial sales appointment is video. We never did that before. We're never going to go back. I have a salesperson that is going to do 7 sales calls today. You can't do more than 3 if you're really, really lucky that everybody lives close by. If you're going house to house, he's going to do 7 today. The fact that he's going to do 7 today is the reason why we've broken every sales record that we've ever had this year. Okay. I mean, it's just been absolutely amazing. Now, COVID has promoted swimming pools, people staying at home, but we're dramatically more efficient. This isn't going to go away. Companies need to address this, and they also need to address the virtual sales and marketing side of things. So in other words, one other example of this is self-selection tools on your website, which is essentially this. Can you mimic the exact, essentially, sales conversation they would have with a salesperson of yours? Could that be mimicked on your website through a series of questions to the point where you're able to give them a recommendation, right? So in other words, like with Todd's company, it might be, what is the best plan for me? What, because I'm assuming there's, Todd, you might have, I don't know a ton about GitLab, but there's different plans, right? And so there's a series of questions that a salesperson would ask to say, okay, based on what you told me in your business, here's the plan that I would recommend. Could you do that on the front end of the buying experience? Could you do that on your website? Oftentimes the answer is yes. And so that's where we're headed in so many ways.
I just want to add to that what's happened, so video, Marcus talked about how he started in text and then they became great at video. But to be honest, there was, especially in B2B, probably less so than B2C, video sort of hit this wall of like, okay, we're doing product demos on video. Okay, cool, great. Now, what's happened is that everybody, the large majority of workers have become junior video producers. So we're going to see now an even more dramatic shift because everybody can record a Zoom call now. They understand how to basically, people are getting lighting. I have lighting in my office. Like, that's ridiculous. But there are many, many people now who can do that. Your marketers, your salespeople. I have salespeople who are doing their own podcasts now. So there is a pretty fundamental shift in that video and content that before had to be written by marketers is now going to be even more available if you make it happen. And that's the big if, right? If you set up your company to be able to do that, if you change people's job descriptions to be able to do that, if you incent that type of behavior, it will happen. If not, most people will go back to what they were used to before. And so it's going to be another opportunity for companies to break out because you're going to operationalize what you learned. And video is one of those areas, and just kind of rapid, small video content creation is going to be even more going forward.
Yeah.
Good. Well, maybe we'll answer a couple more questions. What tools are best for measuring ROI for marketing efforts in B2B companies?
All right, I'll start this one, Marcus, and then you can agree or disagree. So B2B, and I'm going to remember the perspective is I'm in larger B2B or growing in larger B2B companies with a lot of different tactics. Marketing ROI has always been hard to actually figure out how to do that. And it is only harder now because of what we've already talked about, which is consumers going out and finding information themselves. And all these new digital channels gives you more and more data that's harder and harder to parse. And so there's a term called attribution. And in my mind, when you're in a B2B company, which in our company, it takes 30 to 50 touches before someone maybe even interacts with us from a marketing perspective. They've come to our website, they've downloaded some content, they've viewed a demo. It's many of those before they even talk to us. We have to figure out a way to attribute those touches to a cost to get an ROI and then to a sale. And so it's actually not that easy. We are pretty far down the path, but we are using what I call linear attribution, which is basically every touch gets counted and you divide the sale by those touches. And that gives you some level of ROI if you have the cost as well. So it's not easy. I think of marketing, we used to have these wonderful little funnels, I think of marketing now as like a money machine. Have you ever seen a money machine? It's at a fair or something where you get into this machine and there's dollar bills flying around, but from this big fan, and as many as you can grab is basically what, it's fun at a fair because you can come out with a wad of cash. That's kind of how marketing is today, because we have all these people flying around searching for things and hitting our website, and that chaos makes it really hard to measure ROI. Unless you simplify the problem, or else you're counting everything. So that's kind of the state of the union right now, at least in B2B marketing. And so our path towards that is attributing every touch with a little bit of value and trying to figure out how much we're spending on those touches and which ones matter.
Yeah. So some nice analogies there, Todd. What we do at my pool company and at my agency, pretty similar. One's B2C, one's B2B. And that is, if somebody buys from us, I always go back to the initial point of, we'll just call it attribution. And so, for example, if somebody had an initial contact with us because they landed originally on a cost article, then that I'm going to give the credit for the sale. And ultimately, the credit for the sale is going to go to what we would call at that point our content marketing strategy. If the person came from a social media campaign, came from a paid campaign to the site, so we're always measuring each one of those, we're tracking those, then we're going to give the attribution to that particular campaign, all right? And so
You're a first touch guy.
Yeah, I'm a first touch guy. I'm a straight,
Yeah.
I'm not really into the multi-touch thing, but I appreciate it and I don't disagree with it. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely a strong believer in first touch, because I'm just of the mindset of the relationship very well may not have happened if that thing had not have made the initial introduction and put us on their radar. Because my pool company because we don't do all these different types of, let's say, advertising and marketing, we don't do almost any paid. For the most part, it's either just social or search. That's pretty much what it is. And so because of that, I have this beautiful list of revenue from pieces of content that we keep, right? And so at the end of the month, I take the 20 different new customers that we have. I say, what was the first piece of content that they viewed, assuming that brought them into the site, and that piece of content gets the actual credit for the sale. Which is why if you read the Ask You Answer, you can see that, okay, that one single article made us $10 million in revenue. That one particular piece of content made us $3 million in revenue. That's how we're figuring that. The tool that I use is HubSpot.
Yeah. So I think that's a great solution when what you're looking for is specifically a first contact and that they buy something. Where that falls down is when you have a complex selling motion where you have, dozens of people at a company who have to get on board before they buy your thing. And your model is to get them in and then grow them over time. So in a sort of a subscription growth model, that model falls down because now you're not giving enough credit to the thing that might take them from being a $10,000 customer to a $100,000 customer, which is why you have to then start to look at a little bit more nuanced models. And first touch is one, but then you can look at multiple different attribution models. We actually look at 3 or 4 different attribution models and compare and try to figure out. But it's hard. It's
a fascinating discussion. I like what you're doing a lot though, Todd, because it seems like you're giving credence to, and you're at least aware of not just first touch, but some of these other moments of influence, if you will. And that is different than, say, a swimming pool.
Right.
Well, it really follows the buying pattern or the buying process, the buyer journey, as those other touches also move the opportunity along, as you say, Todd, down the funnel or through the flywheel or whatever model you're using.
Right.
You get something, some momentum going, and you have to keep that momentum going. Yeah, especially in a subscription model where you are, as opposed to a product sale. All right. Well, Lilia, we're getting close to the end. We haven't answered all the questions yet. Do you have one more?
We haven't argued enough. I'm sort of disappointed that we didn't disagree more.
Oh,
dang it.
We'll try to answer directly questions as soon as possible after the webinar.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'd like to have you show our audience as we get close to closing here. Certainly we want to thank our 2 speakers here, but I put together one little slide to help our audience with further resources. Marcus is the author of the They Ask You Answer book, and he's going to tell us in just a second about a new book that he's getting ready to publish. But I wanted to share also my experiences and why I felt like I wanted to address this topic. And that is based on the collaborative sale. That was one of the first organizations, the solution selling organization was one of the first to really identify the buying journey. And also to identify 10 years ago, the fact that salespeople must be visualizers and micro marketers themselves, as we've talked about today, adding content themselves, becoming their own little video producer now is even more important. And that book's, it's 10 years old, but it still has some very basic stuff in it. and first identified what the buyer 2.0 is like. But I also want to point out, I did look at growth hacking. It's got some good stuff in it, and particular with the talk about the avatar, and also the automated sales process that takes you through the buyer journey on strictly an electronic basis or a digital basis. And so I commend that book to you. And finally, traction. We've suggested that a little bit. How do you get traction and where do you get it? What channels are important? And that book does a nice job of articulating 19 different channels, not all of them digital. It could be billboard advertising on the highway for some companies, etc. And so look at those and look at that, and then a good amount of words on testing and using tools like HubSpot and others that have been mentioned here today. Marcus, give us just a thumbnail on your new book coming out. I want to give you a shot at that.
I appreciate that, Bill. And just the quick skinny on this, it's twofold. It's how to create a culture of video within your organization, which is absolutely huge going forward. And it's also about going virtual as a company, whether it's virtual events or virtual sales calls, something that's crazy important for so many of us going forward.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcus. And now, Lily, if you'll close us out here. I really appreciate these two gentlemen and the words that they've shared with us, and thank them very much.